and welcome back. This is another CBI at 10. My name is Liz Moseley. I'm an editor here at Tortoise, back with you again to talk about recruitment challenges. There is a job going, quite a famous job. Has happened since last week. I don't know if anybody fancies throwing their hat in the ring. You might just have missed your chance if so, but it's all the other jobs, all the other vacancies that we're particularly interested in talking about this morning. And we're joined by Gareth Vale, who is Operations Director at ManpowerGroup, and Joëlle Warren, who is Executive Director at Warren Partners, who are going to bring two quite different perspectives on how companies in particular are thinking about their skills and labour shortages, and practical steps, really specific and practical things that you can do to help fill those gaps and get productivity moving in the right direction. It would be remiss of us not to talk today about what's happening in government, because as Matthew Percival, who is also here, Matthew's Programme Director, Skills and Inclusion at the CBI, politics has changed, but the economy hasn't, is what you just said to me before we went live, Matthew. Just give us a sense of how the CBI, well, everybody knows what's happened, but how is the CBI thinking about the leadership election for the next Prime Minister?
Yes, you're right to say the political situation is completely different, and we're expecting to have a new government to be working with in September. But what's important to our members, the importance of having a plan for the economy that gives the UK a boost to growth, is consistent. So it's the same objective on behalf of businesses taken to a slightly different audience. So there's two things that we're looking to do over the summer. Both of them we've started already. The first is reaching out and making contact with all of the different leadership contenders. We started that last week, and this morning we've published an open letter to all of the candidates and published a plan for the economy, which is called our How Britain Grows Again, and goes across a range of different aspects of the economy, but particularly relevant to this conversation today, thinking about recruitment challenges and labour shortages. We've got our recommendations in there around supporting business investment in skills, and making sure that we've got a functioning shortage occupations list in the immigration system. But more generally, that paper is talking about the importance of the whole of government having growth as a mission, rather than it being something that is dealt with by a couple of government departments, and having a strong leadership from number 10 behind that mission as a key part of what the new government will need to do. It talks about the importance of tax unlocking business investment as its objective, and remembering that tax is tax in the round when businesses are thinking about it. So yes, corporation tax is really important, but actually issues like business rates need to be on the table too, because it's how businesses think about the collective position for when they think about how competitive the UK is from a tax perspective. The second thing that we need to do through this period is make sure we're still having a good dialogue with those who are running the country until a new Prime Minister is elected. So we've still got a new cabinet continuing in sort of a caretaker role, and it's a risk for businesses if that's a period of paralysis. So we're speaking to them about what it is that they can be doing. It's clear, as doing this caretaker role, they're not going to be making radical departures of policy from where they've been previously, but there's lots that businesses would want to see government continue to make progress with. If there wasn't a leadership election, probably would have been coming through during this period anyway. So let's make sure that's not time lost in government activity to support growth and investment. And that means being able to get things like a replacement for the recovery loan scheme, or more relevant to the conversation we're having today, the government was we were expecting the government to be commissioning the Migration Advisory Committee to start a review of what occupations are in shortage in the economy and how the immigration system should take account of that. We wouldn't want to see those sorts of things delayed until the new government was in, because they're not about radical changes in policy. They're about continuing to deliver in the interim period. So that's what we're looking to do. Two fronts: speaking to the leadership contenders and making sure that they understand the importance of growth and how it feels to be a business at the moment, in combination with continuing to work with those who are leading the country in the interim.
Thanks, Matthew. I mean, there's a lot going on. I confess I've lost track of who's even in the cabinet after last week, who was in and out, and I couldn't keep track of there are specific individuals, some of whom are in jobs that aren't leadership candidates. We've obviously got Nadeem Zahawi, who's trying to do a bit of everything. I wonder if you feel that is realistic of this caretaker government, that they are going to continue to move forward whilst, as you say, obviously not making radical policy decisions because there's so much upheaval. Is that conceivably possible?
I mean, yes, I think so. It's a dreadfully short answer, but yes, because I think you have got recognition that there are important decisions still to take and things to progress, and nobody wants lost time in a period where there isn't a government, and those who are in government now are obviously thinking about what needs to be done in the interim, so that there's a good starting point ready for the new government to come in September.
So Matthew, thank you for the context. We could talk about that all day. Let's get down to business in terms of the purposes of today's conversation, which is specifically about labour shortages. Lots of businesses in real life today, as you say, we don't wait until September. We've got the small question of a summer to get through, and beyond. Lots of businesses and individual households struggling with cost of living crisis and so on. What are you hearing from CBI members now? And obviously we're going to go shortly to Gareth and Joëlle to look at specific actions and advice. What are you hearing, and what are the broad brushstrokes that you would sort of look to shape the conversation today?
Well, I think there's two things you've touched on there, and I'll take them separately. One's around cost of living, and one's around labour shortages. And there is obviously a link between the two, but I think it's worth treating them separately. In terms of cost of living, of course, we've had a separate one of our At 10 series specifically thinking about that. So if anyone didn't catch that one, go back and you can see a whole session specifically about that. But I think you've got lots of businesses doing what they can, being creative. Maybe they're concerned about their financial position and the affordability of pay rises that match inflation, because often those businesses are struggling with the same increases in costs that are concerning households, like energy prices, but where businesses don't have a price cap to try and manage the increases in energy prices that they've seen. So lots of businesses are struggling in the same way that households are with their finances, and that makes pay difficult to be able to say basic pay is going to rise at least in line with inflation for lots of employers. But what we're seeing as the most important thing in that situation is make sure you're speaking with your staff early about the business situation, because if you leave it until the very last minute and you've got a pay settlement to come out, and that's the first time you start talking about the situation of the business, there's a bit of natural cynicism of, oh, well, that is what you would say right now, isn't it, because of the context. So make how you use the way you communicate, the regularity with which you communicate, and the openness with which you speak with your staff about the business situation as a way of making sure you maintain the trust and confidence of your workforce in a period where the last thing you want is them to think that they're not getting a fair deal at the moment, which only makes them more likely in a context of labour shortages to be looking to move. And employers are looking to retain their key staff as much as they're looking to recruit to fill their gaps. So I think that's probably the single most important thing that's coming through around cost of living, is being able to, if you're not able to offer pay in line with inflation, making sure you're being really open and transparent with your staff about the business situation early and regularly, so that there's sort of no surprises and you have the best chance of maintaining trust and confidence through that period. In relation to shortages, obviously we're seeing a mix of short-term and long-term responses to labour shortages. The short-term bit, again, we've got in the archives some At 10s that are relevant in there around how businesses are trying to tailor their employee value proposition to be able to tap into new bits of the labour market that they didn't recruit as successfully from in the past, whether it's thinking about approaches to flexible working or particular benefits that appeal to certain groups of workers that a business has been less successful at recruiting from previously. But the thing that I think is important to acknowledge when we're looking at those sorts of examples is they're the examples typically of you recruiting somebody who's already employed with somebody else. And when you do, that business has then got the shortage rather than you. And we're sort of passing the shortage round a little bit rather than being able to actually solve the shortages in a macro sense. And I think that's something where then every business is thinking, that's the short-term reality. We have to do that to be able to meet our clients' demands now because we need people today. But actually also what are all the levers we can pull to be able to help our people to achieve more through boosting productivity, whether that's through technology adoption or new working practices, so that we're helping to solve labour shortages rather than just move labour shortages. Moving them is a necessity for now, but solving them's the long-term answer. And the other piece that a number of companies are interested in is, what is the potential to be able to bring people into the labour market who are not working at the moment, which of course is another way of helping to solve labour shortages because we're bringing more workers into the labour market, as well as helping the workers we've got to be more productive, which also then links back to the cost of living, doesn't it? Because if we're helping to boost productivity, you then see the wages for workers going up as well, helping with affordability and cost of living. So it does all link together in the end.
Thanks ever so much, Matthew. I can see Joëlle Warren, who's Executive Director of Warren Partners, smiling and nodding a little bit to some of the things that Matthew was saying. I'm tempted to come to you, Joëlle, just to respond. Your business is principally concerned with board and exco level, so really senior people. On that point about trust and transparency, on paper, I really get it that that's a way to develop those long-term trusted relationships with people. It's about more than the money. We understand the context. Can boards handle that? Is that something people are talking about in your experience at the moment? How does that play to you? Does that ring true?
Absolutely, it does. And I think it's becoming, it's been a responsibility of the board for forever, but actually coded in the governance code that culture is a board responsibility. And I think that's what a lot of this comes down to, is the board taking responsibility for culture, and the businesses taking responsibility for this being somewhere that people want to work. It's all very well sort of thinking, the solution to this skills problem is recruitment, and in a lot of cases it is, but it's also around retention and around progression. And I think a lot of the clients that we're working with are having to think about, it's no good bringing people in if we're leaking them out the back door. And we have to be thinking about how do we make this a great place to work. And how do we think about, Matthew's already alluded to flexible working, and progressing the people that are in, and maybe retraining the people that we've got to fill skills gaps that we've got.
Joëlle, having worked in this sector for some time, and over the past maybe 5 or 10 years, conversations around culture, my sense is they've certainly become more frequent. Have they become more sophisticated? Are people getting better at this stuff now?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about perhaps some of the boards we're working with who are really taking it seriously now, and they're doing culture surveys, and they're going out there asking the team, how does it feel to work here? And then not just doing that, but taking them and building them into action plans, which are going to the boards, and the boards are then asking for that, in 6 months, in 12 months, that'll be reviewed again. So they're realizing that, the stakeholders are no longer just the shareholders. The stakeholders are the people who are working in the business, they're the community, and the customers. And boards have come on in leaps and bounds in that.
Thanks so much, Joëlle. I want to keep going on this retention point and talk to Gareth Vale, who is with us, Operations Director at ManpowerGroup, is a really big people and talent company with interest in lots and lots of different sectors and the different levels. And I know we can't see you, Gareth, but hopefully we can hear you. Are you there?
I am, yeah. Apologies for the black screen.
No, don't worry. Just from your from where you sit, from your point, what are the three big reasons, it might be three, it might be five, of people leaving, people choosing to leave a job in the last 6 months or so? What is the retention problem, the leaky bucket that Joëlle mentioned?
Yeah, I think the first thing to point out is the trends affecting the labour market in the last 6 months or so. They're probably not new, but they're newly urgent. So the pandemic has heightened people's awareness, and what started out as a necessity during the pandemic, with people around the world demanding better working conditions, more health and safety protections, increased compensation, especially for those in essential roles. Well, these have rapidly become the new normal. So if I think about the three kind of primary drivers for people leaving their current jobs at the moment, it's probably based around increased compensation, the desire for more flexibility to allow for improved work-life balance, and I think at the moment as well, the third driver is probably employee burnout as well. And if I try and bring those to life, so touching upon the pay and bends one first, I mean, Matthew's already called it out. Basic wage growth hasn't kept pace with the cost of living. So we're seeing workers, particularly in lower skilled roles, chasing higher wages, job hopping for what essentially is relatively small uplifts, although I appreciate an extra £1 or £2 an hour can make a real difference to someone on the breadline. But we have got a scenario where people in, a warehouse worker, for example, in Milton Keynes, will effectively move from one warehouse to another, picking up slightly more pay as they go. There's very little loyalty. And, those who are prepared to pay are the ones that are winning. Now, at the high end of that skills market, increased wages are still very much a driving force for staff leaving their jobs. And one trend, again, that we're seeing an awful lot of at the moment is offers and then counter offers. So businesses trying desperately to hold on to their key talent, but often by this stage, it's just too late. So again, to Matthew's point, where possible, businesses have to try and be proactive in those conversations. When it comes to flexibility and work-life balance, many businesses are absolutely still searching for the right blend of hybrid. For certain skills like something like customer service, the ability to open up the geography and accept virtual working, has made a huge difference to application numbers for some of our key clients. Some of the key research that we've done recently around what matters to people around flexibility, there were three kind of key standouts. It was the ability to choose start and finish times. It was additional holidays. And then it was about having fully flexible workplace options as well. So I know not every employer will be able to offer fully home working options, but all employers should be talking to their workforce, understanding what's feasible and what's really going to make a difference to their employees. And then just very quickly, employee burnout. I know many people are sick of hearing about the pandemic, but the reality is COVID-19 fundamentally exposed the growing mental health crisis affecting workers across the labour force, and employee burnout really is a growing issue. With the great resignation that we saw earlier this year, for many this has just put additional pressure on those left behind. So if you've got a team of, say, 10 people and 3 or 4 leave, backfilling these 3 or 4 roles might take a little bit longer than normal due to the market. And then you've got the additional support, training, mentoring to get new starters productive. And this just heaps more and more pressure, stress, work on those existing workers. And if you don't get those guys to feel appreciated for this extra effort, you're gonna see resignations, and likely this cycle just continues. And we do hear quite a lot from job seekers that their current company talks a good game when it comes to health and well-being, but the reality just doesn't quite match the rhetoric. So I think businesses really need to find ways to look at their policies, their culture, their leadership to help support and role model good behaviors around mental health, as well as helping to build resilience and mental fitness within their workforce.
Yes, fascinating. That's something that I know board level conversations think about a lot, Joëlle. Senior people showing vulnerability, as Gareth says, role modeling good behaviour, not sending emails at 11:30 at night. All of that stuff has become very much more prevalent and sort of articulated. You know, it's on the record. People are saying we need to do this. Part of that well-being and cultural conversation is DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that to me swings both ways. It's a retention play, and it's a talent attraction and recruitment play. Just unpack that a little bit for us from your perspective, from those senior board and exco people.
Yes, so I suppose the concern is that it's sort of window dressing, and that boards have been criticised for just adding people of colour or of different genders or other diversity to meet quotas. I think they're now coming alive to the fact that it's good for business, and they're realising the value that diversity is bringing into the boardroom and the boardroom discussions. It's driving that down through organisations. That's the challenge, and what we're seeing is that excos have started to address diversity, and you know, very often it's not too bad at entry level, but it's not progressing through to the senior management levels, and I think that's a cultural issue to some extent. And I heard a really interesting statistic yesterday, which is that people are 3 times as likely to leave an organisation if they've had an experience of a microaggression. So those are those sort of subtle acts of inclusion which are actually really pernicious, and that speaks to culture, and that speaks to, you know, we might be saying the right things, but if we're tolerating, and you alluded there to, you know, leadership behaviours, Gareth, and if those things are not being stamped on and not being modelled, then, you know, not only are you not going to hit your quotas, but actually you're going to be losing talent. And we've got to create cultures that allow inclusion, not just build diverse workforces, and also allow equality of progression, because we're seeing both in gender and in race and ethnicity, we're seeing people not progressing through organisations in the way they should.
Yeah. Again, there's some good stuff in the CBI at 10 archive on how to slay those diversity dragons once and for all. Gareth, I do wonder a little bit about, while we're on the topic of diversity, you know, Joel has mentioned there's gender, there's ethnicity, sexual orientation, all of that good stuff that we've talked about a lot. I wonder specifically when it comes to recruitment throughout an organisation, how imaginative businesses are, and the type and the sort of diversity of thought, if you like, or of background, even if I can use the word. How much are businesses able to see beyond perhaps, you know, a person must have done this, I want to recruit them from, to Mackie's point at the beginning, my direct competitor. Has that sort of stranglehold on a type of background fitting a type of role started to loosen as people have needed to look, you know, to a wider pool of candidates, or are we still some way to go on that?
I think there is some way to go. I think many businesses now are appreciating that the skills that they need today will be likely different to the skills that they need in the future. So it should be about learnability. It should be about people with the right aptitude, the right attitude, the right basic skills to be able to then, you know, grow and develop within role. But I think the reality is that, you know, particularly when recruiting on volume, you are still looking to a certain degree for a certain level of experience, a certain level of skills that are fundamental to putting that person into a job here and now. One of the things that we're working with many businesses on, though, is academy services, training services. So helping them understand if someone's got 60% of the skill set, how can we help them on the job develop, grow, get experiences, and get the development that they need to get them up to a point that's, you know, absolutely right fit for that particular role.
If I can
Gareth,
add on this diversity point, if that's okay, I was going to say, one of the things we did last year was spend some time interviewing a whole range of our members about what their diversity and inclusion ambitions were for the next sort of 2 or 3 years. And this point really comes through about it being broader than just protected characteristics in those discussions. So what they told us was they absolutely want to keep up the pace of progress on gender and on ethnicity, but they felt that as an organisation they needed to be able to do more in other areas that had got less attention previously too. And yes, there's a couple of protected characteristics in that list. They were talking about age diversity and disability. But then they're also talking about the importance of having an inclusive culture and thinking about social mobility in the round. And the reason I highlight that focus on age and disability is because when we're talking about labour shortages and what are the groups within the labour market or within the country where we've got fewer workers active in the labour market than we had previously, the two rising trends are people who have become ill and are out of work for ill health, initially short-term sick but then becoming long-term sick, and also a decline in that trend we had for more older workers remaining in work. That trend has reversed a bit. So businesses thinking about how they can build a multi-generational workforce and attract people back into work who might have left for one reason or another, and also sort of overcoming that nervousness that there can be sometimes in a business that's not familiar with reasonable adjustments, and how it's often a lot less scary than a business might first think to be able to make those adjustments to help somebody with a health condition back into work and to support them to make a really valuable contribution for you. And again, if people want more information on that, on our website within our diversity and inclusion campaign, we've been running sort of a mini series of interviews with business executives, and the first one we did was with Sodexo, and they were talking exactly about this age question, and the second one that we published was with eBay, and eBay were talking about inclusive culture and, you know, how it's a real learning experience to be able to build that sort of culture. So there are more resources. It's worth flagging on our website for anyone who's looking to try and get a bit more on that particular topic.
Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Matthew, and perhaps Alice will put links to those kinds of pages in the chat. Do fire in questions if you want to me to put them to Matthew, Joel and Gareth. Gareth, as both a candidate and as a hiring manager over the course of my career, I've had excellent and amazing experiences with recruitment agencies and absolutely terrible ones. I wonder, as somebody who runs one, could you just give us some tips if I'm sitting there thinking, how do I make this partnership work? I've got really critical vacancies I want to fill. How do I keep my side of the bargain, and what should I expect from you?
Yeah, sorry to hear you've had bad experiences with recruitment businesses. Hopefully not with ours. I guess the first thing to call out is, you know, many businesses just, they won't have the in-house expertise or desire to manage recruitment internally. So the advantage of using a recruitment agency is that we've got, you know, that as our core focus, finding people work. A good recruitment agency should be able to help you scope the viability of hiring that particular role. They can advise on how to write a good job ad, where to place the ad. And really importantly, a strong recruiter can sell the opportunity to a candidate who in this market might have 3-4 other opportunities. But I guess a true partnership probably goes beyond just helping to fill the odd vacancy. So an effective recruitment partner can help build an organization's talent strategy. And we all know that skilled workers are tough to come by, and, you know, you really need to think creatively and consider different mechanisms for engaging talent. And we often talk about the 4 B's in our business. So build, buy, borrow, and bridge. So the build is about investing in learning and development to grow your own talent pipeline. Buy is about going out to external market to find the best permanent talent that you can't build in-house, or that you might not be able to build in the time frame required. Borrow is cultivating communities of talent. So this includes kind of part-time, freelance, contract, temporary workers to complement the existing skills that you have. And then bridge, this is about helping people move on, move up to new roles inside or outside the organization. So a really good partnership can help you get the right blend of talent to meet your business needs, now and hopefully in the future as well.
Interesting. Build, buy, borrow, and bridge as a sort of comprehensive set of things. Everyone loves a bit of alliteration. I've written it down. Thanks, Gareth. Joëlle, how might you add to that list? What's the best way for an organisation to work with somebody like you who's really thinking about this, as you say, a candidates market from a different perspective?
Yeah, I think Gareth used the word partnership, and I think that's really important, and almost encouraging our clients, and with our clients, we tend to be an extension of them. And so it's around being really open and transparent. So if there are issues, let's, share them with us. Don't try and hide your, your dirty things behind you. We need to know, but also listen. So obviously we have a lot of experience in how to approach the market, in the kind of, is the remuneration right? Are you looking in the right places? And I think also be open-minded. So we do spend quite a lot of time challenging clients when they're giving us a spec that's sort of too narrow. And we're saying, well, if you are going to be that narrow, we may not be able to find the breadth of candidates you're looking for. And we're certainly finding that in the current market. And then I suppose there's something around speed. So sometimes being prepared to be really quick and meet someone because they are in a lot of processes, and we're getting that a lot at the moment. Good people are being sought after. So you can't have clients who are taking too long in their decision making. They have to be pretty nimble, but also being prepared to allow us the time to unearth diverse talent. And it does take longer. I was so dismayed recently where we're working with a FTSE 100 client for a very senior role, but they said they needed it really, really quickly. And we said, well, we do need 6 weeks for this project rather than 4 if you want diversity. And they said, we haven't got time for that. And I kind of thought 2 weeks in the scheme of, this huge important hire, and then prepared to give up diversity for that sake. I think also there's something about how they present themselves to candidates. So, if your website is full of sort of people who look the same, then attracting people of difference may be really difficult. If your interview panel is all very monochromatic, then you won't be able to make people say, well, actually that's somewhere where I could flourish too. So it's really being open.
Thanks ever so much, Joëlle. Gareth, these kind of healthy recruitment practices, Joelle's mentioned things about the composition of the interview panel, the presentation, the employer brand stuff. We've mentioned that a lot in both labour shortages conversations and in diversity and inclusion conversations. Is it your sense that the clients that you work with, both people who are looking to recruit at scale and people who are sort of appointing very senior people to specific and or perhaps technical, highly skilled positions, do you think that stuff has been wholesale implemented, or is it still a bit piecemeal and a bit patchy?
In terms of things like EVPs, I think it's a work in progress. I think authenticity is absolutely critical there. We do see, attrition still predominantly kicking in, in that first year or two, and that's because often the promise, the EVP doesn't necessarily live up to people's expectations. So I think that's critical, getting the authenticity for the CV, the culture, the leadership, absolutely fundamental. I just reiterate, that point though around speed. I think businesses don't necessarily realise that, if a hiring manager is taking 5 days to respond on a CV, it's likely that candidate will have already been put forward for X number of jobs elsewhere. So, I so often hear we need more CVs, but actually, if you can fully capitalize on the CVs that you receive, the likelihood is you can significantly reduce your time and cost to hire. So critical piece for me, that one.
Gareth, one thing we haven't touched
Sorry, Liz,
on.
could just one point on this whole thing around EDI. It's actually not just diverse talent who look at you and how diverse you are. There are lots of people who, white men who are looking at an organisation that's full of white men and thinking, that's not the place for me, that's not how I'm used to, that's not the environment I want to be in. I want more diversity in my employer. So don't just think you're shutting off a diverse pool. You're actually shutting off the whole pool.
Yeah. It's a good watch out. Thanks, Joëlle. What I was going to mention, something we haven't touched on specifically yet, is on that retention piece. And we've done whole sessions on this too. That question about upskilling and training in role. So part of that is, of course, part of the promise and the experience, and you join us and then we'll take you on a journey and you can flourish and thrive. But part of that is in the retention conversation. If you are going to have some quite difficult conversations with staff to say, look, the economic situation is difficult, the trading conditions are hard, we can't give you the inflationary pay rise you're all asking for, but what we can do is give you this. Is that something that is meaningful? And more importantly, Gareth, is it viable and affordable in the short term for organisations to offer those kinds of upskilling experiences?
I think it's critical. Yeah, absolutely. And we're seeing more and more businesses investing in reskilling their existing workforce, as well as reskilling and upskilling people as they come into their workforce as well. I think the critical thing for me is about succession planning and mobility. That needs to be really deliberate. As someone that runs one of our businesses, I know how painful it can be to lose really good people from one part of the business into another account, but I'd much rather lose them internally than to a competitor. So regular career conversations, I think, are absolutely necessary to understand the aspirations of an employee. And then you need to co-create that kind of personalized development plan accordingly. But yeah, very much so. I think it's a critical piece for businesking.
I think this is a key message for us, the government, as well, though, Liz, because whether it's short term or longer term, that's where looking to a new government as well, we're saying how you create the climate in which it's as easy as possible for businesses to invest more in the skills of their workforce and to drive up business investment in skills. Things like being able to use your apprenticeship levy not just on whole qualifications, but if you need one bit of a qualification to be able to progress to a new role, then that's a good outcome as well, rather than just thinking whole qualifications, which I think is really key in adjusting from a learning system built around giving people qualifications to start work through to helping people have the learning and development experiences to progress through a career where they'll need to keep evolving their skills over time. And that's a key part of that conversation we're having with government as well as with our members for how we make that work, including in partnerships with education providers, whether it's independent training providers or colleges or universities. There's sort of a whole range of different providers out there that will want to help businesses think about how they can improve that offer and deliver the training that they need.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matthew. Gareth, just we're in the last few minutes. I wonder if there's a sort of pinch point emerging in all of this, which is that if you are a hiring manager, very often you also have another job. It's not, that of course companies have talent teams whose whole role is about sort of filling the pipeline, retention, all of that kind of thing. But very often hiring managers, that they're hiring and doing other things too. And this pressure, particularly all of the great advice that we've heard of how to do it right, it can become a really time intensive exercise just to try and backfill and replace. Obviously, that's why you have to sort of get ahead of it. But right now, in the moment, the pressure to hire and recruit and retain might itself be one of the challenges and is sort of causing the burnout. Is that something, Gareth, that you're hearing from people who are just sort of really feeling like they're on a hamster wheel, they can't catch up with themselves?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think you know, many of the hiring managers that we work with are struggling. They've got a, like you say, a day job to do, and yet they're having to interview and you know, put hiring as a priority to just, you know, think about keeping them standing still. So it is an ongoing issue. I guess one of the things that I'd call out there is, you know, how can we help hiring managers? How can we help to ensure that they've got the skills to be able to do a good interview? How can we ensure that they really understand the culture of the organization and the right fit for their business? Because if they get that right, hopefully going forwards, they'll have less issues going forwards, and they won't have to, you know, hire at the same levels that they've had to hire at over the course of the last 6 months or so. So yeah, I think that there is a pinch point, like you say.
Joëlle, any last thoughts?
No, I think you're absolutely right there, Gareth. And I was just smiling wryly because I heard of a hiring manager that's just resigned because he said, I don't want to be a recruitment manager, and felt like he'd spent the last year just doing that.
It's funny, anecdotally, it's something I've heard a fair amount too, even in news and media organisations experiencing the same thing. I want to say a big thank you to Joëlle Warren, to Gareth Vale, and of course to Matthew Percival from the CBI for joining us today. Next week is the last CBI at 10 before the summer break, in which we'll be looking at what businesses themselves are doing to help tackle the cost of living crisis. So it's an important conversation. Who knows what will have happened in the Conservative Party and government by then? I'm sure another exciting week ahead. Thank you very much for joining us. As I always say, please do go put the kettle on before you dive back into your emails, and have a great rest of Wednesday. All the best. Bye-bye.